Hello everyone and welcome back to Revit Snippet. Great tips you can learn in just a few minutes. Today let's talk about revisions, in particular revisions on sheet. You may have done this before. When you open a drawing, go to revisions on sheet, click on edit. This is where you can add new revisions onto this drawing. So at the moment it's now of revision P1 because I have selected here the revision of sequence number 1. If I now tick the box for the second revision of sequence 2, like that, you will see now the number has changed from P1 to P2. That's quick and simple enough to do, but imagine you have to do the same for 20, 50 or sometimes 300 drawings in the same Revit model. Doing this manually will take a lot of time. That's why we have here this Dynamo script that we will create together today to do this automatically for you. So for example, I have on this sheet revision sequence 1 and 2. If I change to this other one here, it has no revision at the moment. We can now turn to Dynamo, put in here revision number 3, and click run. You can see right away, this drawing now has received revision P1. When I go to edit revisions on sheet, sequence number 3 has been selected for this drawing. If I now return to the first drawing from before, it is now P3, not P2 anymore, because under revision on sheet, we have 1, 2, 3 all selected. So let's see quickly now how we can build this ourselves. By the way, if you are new to this channel, make sure to subscribe now, because we do tutorials like this one every single week. Subscribe already? Let's get started. Let me quickly close this Dynamo script now, so we can start from the same space and create a new definition now. We can also undo what we did here. And the first step is obviously to select the drawings that we want to apply the same revision to. Let's begin with selecting all drawings in this model. I can now right-click and search for categories. This note there, we can now select sheets on this menu. And the next step will be all elements of category. Connect this to here now, and you can see it has given back 22 drawings, which are those that we have right there. If you want to get the same revision applies to all your sheets in your model, this is all you have to do in terms of selecting drawings. But sometimes I know some of you may want to be more selective. For example, you want to apply the same revision now, but only to all of those sheets under the architectural series. So all the drawings that have their number starting with ARCH, you want to get them and modify them only. Let's do the same here. To get the sheet number, I can drop in here sheet number. Connect to there, and you guessed it, we have now 22 different sheet numbers. Some begins with ARCH, that's the one we want, same as that one and that one. But things like ING or 000 down below, we want to filter these out. Easy to do as well. We need to firstly check these numbers to see which ones begin with ARCH. The note for this will be start with, this one here. We can now supply these tags or strings into this input port. They will be the strings or tags that this node will check for string containment. The word to search for in these numbers we need to define now, maybe using a code block. So I will double click here, put in the quotes, and between quotes I can put in ARCH. Supply this word there to here, and you can see now we have 22 test results coming back. Let's see if these are accurate. The first number here begins with ARCH. That's why its result here is true. The number at index number 10 is simply 000. So now in here, the test result for that number will be false because this text here doesn't begin with ARCH. So far so good. We now need a way to get only the drawings whose numbers satisfy this check. Let's now put in here a Boolean mask node for that purpose. And the list of things to filter will be these drawings. I can apply straight to there. And of course for the mask, we need to get this list of check results into there. If I now put in here a quick watch node, I can see now from the in-output port will be the 13 drawings that I want to get. To double check, I can also put in here a new sheet number node. Connect those sheets to there. And obviously, these are the correct ones. So we're good to go. Next step, before moving further with the script now, we need to make sure in Revit we have the setup needed for the whole thing here to work. Firstly, let's go to View and open Revisions. You can see in this project I have 5 revision sequences already defined. So from sequence 1 to 2 to 3 to 5. If you want to add new ones, that's easy, just to add here. We have now 7 and 6. If you want to instead delete some of them, simply select them here and press delete. Next step, we need to be clear about the way our revisions are numbered. At the moment, my revisions are numbered per sheet. Let's change this now to per project. Let me show you quickly the difference between these two modes. Click OK now. When I return to this drawing here, it is now showing P2 for revision number. Let's see what's going on when I click on Revision on Sheet Edit. You can see it's quite logical because I have here sequence 1 and 2 selected, so that's why it's showing here P2. But what if I untick revision sequence 1? So only sequence 2 will be applied to this drawing. Click OK. You can see there, it's still showing as P2 because it's actually taking this number from the sequence number of the revision that is using. In this case, that's sequence 2, number 2, so you have P2 there. Nothing will change if I go back to View to Revisions and change the numbering method to per sheet. Let's see what that means for this drawing now. You can see there the number changes back to P1. That is because if I go here now, at the moment there's only one revision applied to this sheet. So even if I untick sequence 2 and apply sequence 5, for example, the number is still P1 because that's the number of revisions this sheet is using. If I want that to be P2, I have to add another one here. Maybe sequence 4 and 5 is now active for this drawing. And that will bring this number now to P2. So before you even do something with Dynamo, make sure you understand the revisions numbering system being used in your project. So the result will be what you will expect. Okay, back to Dynamo now. We now need to specify the revision sequence that we want to apply to all of those 13 sheets. Let's see which one we want to get. If I go back to View, Revisions now. Let's say I want to add revision sequence 3 to all of my sheets here. All 13 of them. That's easy to specify. I only have to give Dynamo the number of the revision sequence. So let's do number there. And the default value will be 0. We can now quickly change this to 3. Press enter. Next step, we want to apply this revision sequence to all of those sheets. Now, I did try to find default Dynamo nodes. You know, the kind of nodes that comes with Dynamo installation, like some of those here and there. I tried to do this task using only default nodes, but I couldn't find anything that does it for me. That's why I eventually turned into using Python for this task. It's not a very complex Python script, so we can quickly recreate this together now. If you don't have much time, simply use the link in the video description to download the final completed script, including this Python node. Let's now drop in here a Python node. And for this one, we need to have 2 input ports, because one will get the list of drawings you want to modify. And we now need to add the second input port for getting this revision sequence number to use. Simply select the plus sign there and connect this now to input 1. Next step, let's now edit this Python script. We can double click here now. And here you can see the built-in Python node editor for Dynamo. Now it will take the whole day or even several days to cover how to create Python script for Dynamo. We won't have time to go into all the details today in this quick tutorial. If you want to know everything practical about developing Python script for Dynamo, simply go down to the video description and follow the link there to my full online Python scripting for Dynamo course. For now, let me give you a quick version of that for this particular task. Well, firstly, as you will learn in that course, it's not very convenient to use this editor here because it's very basic and it doesn't have auto code completion. So you will get things like typos getting in the way. It will just make it harder and more time consuming for you to develop your script. That's why in the course I suggest and use Visual Studio Code as the code editor for doing this same task. We have a separate YouTube video on how to set up this code editor. If you want to know that, simply go down to the video description again and use the right link there. Of course, it's perfectly fine if you want to type things in here, but for now I will do it here in Visual Studio Code, and then later on I will copy everything here to there and let that run in Dynamo. Okay, to begin, we of course need to import the required Python libraries for this task. Let me just quickly copy it from my template. So copy and paste it here. The first few lines from number 1 to number 20, these are the libraries that I'm importing for use in Dynamo. The next 4 lines in here simply obtain some of the core objects of the Revit programming interface. So you have here your main document, which is in this case this Revit model there, and also some other objects like UI application, and UI document that we can use later on if we need them. Anyway, the next step now will be to obtain our inputs. So we have here our sheets going into input 0. Let's get that into our Python script here as well, so we can understand that input. I can now define a new variable to hold those drawing sheets. So let's say view sheets equals unwrap element from input number 0. And the same for the sequence number, in this case number 3. I can say revision sequence number equals input number 1. The next thing to do is to obtain the element ID in Revit of this revision sequence number 3. So firstly, let's put in here a placeholder variable for that kind of data. I will initiate it with the none value. So essentially it's nothing at the moment. We will soon put an ID into it using this other line below. To do so, we firstly need to obtain all the revision sequences in the document or in the Revit model. Let's call this one revisions. And then the way to get them will be by using a filtered element collector. That will take place on the active document, in this case DOC for doc. So this object will get everything in the model. However, I'm only interested in revision, so let's put in here a second filter of class to get only elements of a certain class. The class in this case will be revision. So in here, you will get all the 5 revision sequences that we saw in Revit under View Revisions. Next step, we want to check all of those in a loop. So I can use here a for loop. So for R for revision in all of the revisions. This loop here will check each item in that revisions list, and we want to obtain here the sequence number of each revision there. So let's now do a conditional statement now. If r.sequence number, that will give us the sequence number of the revision. If this number is equal to this number here we obtained from input number 1, I can now just copy this and paste it here. So if that condition is true, we know that's the revision we need. I will then assign to this revision ID that we specified before. I will give it this value, which is the revision item here, .id. That simply means this revision item that I have found to be the right one, I want to obtain this element ID and then assign that ID now to this placeholder parameter or variable that I have defined from there. Essentially, at this point, this variable here will stop having the none value. It will get this ID value instead. Next step, I want to check if this variable here has indeed been assigned an element ID, because you know sometimes if I put in here something like 30 or 100, obviously that's not an existing revision sequence in the model. So in that case, I want to tell the user, look, that number there doesn't exist as a revision sequence, so you should go back and check it. To do this check, I can simply just use another conditional statement here. If revisions ID equals to none, that means this statement didn't happen. I didn't get the right revision sequence that I wanted. In that case, I can use the out variable to deliver a message to the user of this Dynamo script, and the message will be no revision found. Check your input. Please. So when I see this, they will know that this is what's happening when I put in here some non-existing revision sequence number. We can even check it out right now. So I will Control A to select all, press Control C to copy, and paste all of that into here, into this Python node. When I change this now to maybe 50, yeah, we all know that's not an existing revision sequence number. We are stopping at number 5, so 50 isn't there. If I now run this, you will see revision not found. That's the message that we set up before. Okay, before moving on, let me switch the run mode back to manual, because automatic sometimes can crash your Revit. So let's say we have gone past this point. That means we have found the right revision sequence to use. The next few lines of codes, we need to put them in the else part of this conditional statement. So when we get to here, we know that revision ID is no longer none. It's now holding a valid element ID. This is when we can start assigning the right revision sequence to our sheets. And to do so, I need to firstly open a transaction, which is simply a mode where editing to the Revit model can take place. All of this will be covered in the basic Python scripting video that you can get to from this video's description. So before I define this new transaction, I need to make sure there's no other transactions open. To check that and ensure that this is the case, I can simply put in here this line. That simply means that any transaction happening at this point, I want to force close them so we can then start a new one. To start a new transaction, I can use these two lines here. This line essentially creates this object called transaction by using this constructor, or simply a way to initiate the object. It's starting with a keyword transaction, and then you need to supply two input variables to this method. The first one is simply the document this transaction will take place on, and the second input will be simply the name of this transaction, as you can see later in Revit. Once this transaction object has been created, we can then choose Start to begin editing the Revit file. Next step, I want to use this input data here, view sheets. I know there will be more than one view in there, so to apply the same revision ID here, I need to loop over this list using a second for loop. In this case, let's say for V in view sheets. I want to now get the current revision IDs or revision sequences that this view here already has. We can now use a new variable called Rev IDs. That's a plural in this case, so don't get confused with that one. That's the one we want to add, and this is the list of IDs that this view currently has. So Rev IDs will be v dot get additional revisions IDs. This is simply a method in the Revit API that you can look up and use. Again, if you want to know how to look this up, check out the basic Python scripting tutorial in this video description. So in here, I should get the element IDs of all the revision a sheet here currently has. For example, if I run this method on this drawing here now, this one, it will return to me two element IDs, one for revision sequence 4 and the second ID for revision sequence 5. Next step, we want to add to this list the sequence ID that we have found up there, this one here. Super easy to do. I can now use revids.add and then supply this revid parameter that we already have. The final step here is to reassign this new list of revision sequence IDs back to this view. Think about it this way. From the view, we extract some information. We then modify this information using this line here. But then for the view to take on this new data, we need to reassign this information back to the v variable here for that view. The way to do it is very simple as well. I can simply say v dot and then copy this method there, change the get word to the set keyword. And now that's another Revit API method, which is kind of the opposite of that one. Instead of getting, now we are setting data to this view. Because this needs some data to keep to the view, we need to supply it here as an input variable. That data, I can simply use this list of IDs, and that's what it needs there. So just to recap, if I run all these three lines here on this single view, this will happen. Firstly, Dynamo will look at this list and see there are two IDs. It will then get those two IDs into that Rev IDs list. For the second step, it will add the sequence ID for this sequence number 3 to that same list, effectively extending the list there to 3 items instead of 2. In the third step, it will apply all 3 IDs back to the view to then check this box for us automatically. back to Dynamo now. The final step is to commit this transaction. If you don't commit this transaction here, then everything you do with those 4 lines will be thrown away. Revit won't be changed in any way, so there's no point not committing it. To commit, I can simply do transaction. That will be the same object there, and do a method called commit on that object. And then just to simply let the user know things have been done, I can use the out variable to deliver a message like done. Okay, that's actually all we have to do for this Python script. It's quite simple, so now we can check out how it works. Let's do Ctrl+C now, paste everything in here, save changes, and run the script. Well, this is an issue sometimes you will get if you copy code from somewhere else to this Python script here. Back to Visual Studio Code, you will see there are certain annotations about white spaces. In here we have 4 little dots. If you look closely, that means from the beginning of this line to the first letter on the line, we have 4 spaces. The line below, however, there's only 1 arrow. That means there's a tab character there between the beginning of the line and the word width. For things to work in Dynamo, indentations like these, they have to be consistent. That means you can choose to use all spaces or all tabs, but you cannot mix the two. I'm mixing them here, so that's why we're getting this error. With Visual Studio Code, however, this is easy to fix. I can simply go down to the taskbar, click on this text that's now saying spaces 4. And then in the drop-down that just appeared, I can choose to convert indentation to spaces. And now you will see all those arrows are now gone. We can now copy the whole thing here again, paste it in here, and choose run one more time. Now it's working, even though the result is no revision found, which was kind of expected because we didn't change this number. We can now set this to be 3 then, and click on run. Watch closely, however, this P2 text is going to change to P3 after the script is run. So run it now. And as you expected, this is now P3. When I go to revisions on sheet for this one, P3 is there added and selected just like the other 2 below. And because we have done this for all of the sheets whose numbers start with ARCH, if I now go to even this one, and then check out its revision on sheet list, you will see sequence number 3 is here and selected. It didn't do it for other sheets that we didn't select. Let me prove it. If I go to this ING sheet, for example, and check out the same list here for this drawing, nothing here selected, including revision sequence 3. So everything works. Okay, if you enjoyed this lesson and want more like this coming every single week, make sure to subscribe to this channel. If you couldn't follow this whole tutorial and just want this Dynamo script to use, simply follow the link in the video description to download it. Also, if you want to take your knowledge of Dynamo scripting to the next level, simply go down to this video description and follow the link there to check out my full online course on this topic. For now, enjoy automating this task, and I'll see you in the next lesson.